Hi everyone, welcome to the first installment of our brand new section called Behind the Scenes. In this section we're going to pick and dissect a weekly vision from our Instagram account. If you're not following it yet, do it now because, well, that way you can get your weekly intake of inspiration for your next renderings as well as some behind the scenes stories, so yay! Today we're going to have a look at this very image, which is here. As you can see, it's a pretty simple image in which there are kind of a couple of subtleties that we're going to have a look at. Basically, we're going to cover the 3D modeling and texturing, a little bit of lighting, and then we're going to switch to the post-production part where we're going to have a look at all the layers that have been used to create this image. So let's start first with our 3ds Max file. In terms of framing, as you can see, it is a pretty simple image with a frontal view of an office space. If you want to have a look at it at the whole model, you can see there's basically light coming from this area, from the side. The main light is coming in front of us, and there's also a little bit of light coming from behind us from a patio here. So in terms of framing, there's nothing really special. It's just a frontal view, and as you can see, there's also, like, if we sort of imagine the rule of third, we're really doing like a simple thing with the lower third around here, and the main frame, the main windows are basically in the middle, and also there's the glazing here that sort of takes a good part. And the thing is that the thing we were supposed to keep in mind is that we have to take into account the reflection that is going to be in this big glass panel here. So in terms of lighting, it's a really quite simple setup. There's a simple dome light around here with an HDRI from Peter Guthrie. I think it's an overcast light because I basically didn't want any direct light to get into the image, and I wanted to get some sort of a nice bloom effect in the background, something quite overexposed in the end. There's also some IES light from these spotlight here. And I think there are a couple of, not soft boxes because I used spheres, but because here I wanted to get some warmer light on the left and get some more interesting cast shadows on the left side of the image, because otherwise the windows here were a little bit too far to get some more interesting shadows. And then I would have like I would need a direct sun, which was definitely not what I was looking for. In terms of modeling still, there's a couple of interesting stuff with, it's really small detail, but there are a couple of IV in the background that you can actually see in the final render, but they're extremely subtle, but it's something I quite like, because the idea, I knew that the background would be slightly out of focus, so that's why it's still conveniently detailed, but it's really simple. And also, like, the background trees here, everything is done with a forest pack because it's, well, easier that way. And I don't think there's anything really special regarding the modeling. There's like the basic usual, everything is like modeled with splines and sweep modifiers to get the plinth and stuff like that. There are a couple of simple details with the electric sockets. I quite like the idea of having the exit thing because it kind of brings a new hue in the image, which is kind of subtle, but still you can notice it pretty easily. And beside that, I think that's pretty much it in terms of modeling. The rest of the models are mostly ready-made or kind of tweaked a little, but it's nothing like these were modeled. A couple of stuff were modeled like from scratch. In terms of texturing, though, there are a couple of things. The main material were the concrete here and the linoleum on the ground, plus the brass on the right here. So this the concrete material is pretty basic, though. If we have a look at it now, there are, I think, 2 or 3 different materials. It's not the same one as for the exterior. At the end of the rendering, I thought this is not actually the most realistic thing, even though it can happen to have leaks like that inside, because it could have rained when the concrete was made, but still, you usually have that kind of leaks outside, but still sort of okay. The concrete outside and inside is not the same, but as you can see, it's pretty simple. It's really simple, with only like simple diffuse map reflectance, so that you get this interesting thing. I didn't even use dirt maps on that one because, well, wasn't that necessary, I guess. The other thing is the so the ground. The ground is pretty simple. There's it's only a noise map in the diffuse and not in the diffuse, in the reflection, so that you get subtle differentiation of reflectivity. Then the main change is in the reflection glossiness. This is a simple dirt map with a little bit of noise on top of it, so that you get this sort of interesting subtle changes in here at different phases, if I may say. And then it's just a bump map, so that you actually have a little variation. So extremely simple, but it's still basically what I was aiming for, so I was quite happy with it. Another thing that was quite fun is the glazing here. I usually use like this kind of glazing here with a fall off in the reflection, because I'm never really happy with the Fresnel, because it's either too reflective or not enough reflective. So here is a fall off that I use to bump up a little bit the reflection when you're looking straight into the glass panel. And there's also a sub-object for the glazing here, so that you get this nice green exit color, basically. The brass here is pretty simple as well. It's just a noise that is tiled on the y-axis, so that you get this sort of streaks effect, plus a dirt map on top of it for the reflection glossiness. So you can see it's pretty simple, but I quite like the effect. And I think it's pretty much it. There's really nothing extremely complicated in this image. Everything is more related to how the composition works and how the lighting is done. If we now switch to the post-production part, here was the original rendering. So as you can see, it's kind of a change. There were a couple of fuck-ups, basically, with the lighting here that suddenly stops. I couldn't really figure out why, so I just photoshopped the rest. But basically, the problem I had with this image was I wanted to have like a more blinding, if I may say, or overexposed exterior, and it lacked a bit of contrast. And colors basically were a little bit off compared to what I had in mind. So the first thing I did was adding the glare here in the this was basically calculated in V-Ray, but I basically have 2 passes because I like to have it really in specific spot. So that's how I did. Then there's a color here, is a slight changes on the edge of the glass panel so that we get this nice green effect. Here's a level curve just to get the ceiling to be a lot wider because it was too dark at first. And here is something to pump up the title on the glass panel because the original thing didn't come up properly. So it was pretty simple. Then the usual light. So here is just the level adjustment, a little bit of a dodge on the most reflective surfaces, so a little bit of the ground if you look at it, and a little bit in the background here as well. So you can see it does bring a difference. There was a little bit of burn to get some interesting variation, mainly in the ground and in the lower part here. Then there was this spot correction. So as I said, there was something that kind of wasn't working in the original rendering, so I just changed it. And that was just by using a brush and first tweaking the light and then tweaking the hue so that you get the same yellow basically. Then there was the glass reflection, which was a little bit there was like a little bit too much of reflection in the back of the image here, in the lower part of the image. So that's why I changed it. And I think that's pretty much it. There's a couple of adjustments here for the spotlight, where I brought actually extra from like images set to screen and with low opacity, but basically that's what I used. Screen mode, like that. Whoops, screen mode. And then since I was a little bit short on time, I used the pretty efficient Nick Collection filters series. So here, this one, like the first layer here, is just a camera row. If you go into there, where I basically usually bump up a little bit the clarity, a little bit the vibrance, depending on the image. And I just tweak a little bit the exposure if need be. Then it's a little bit of this one, pastel, that sort of makes interesting blue shadows. This one is the contrast color range that was basically used for the metal panel here, so that it's sort of have a more interesting contrast. And the high key was used for basically the lighter part of the image, because it gives a nice dynamic range without actually being too much. So as you can see, it's pretty simple. And the final one was cross-processing, just to sort of homogenize the whole image. So that's pretty much it, I think. As I said earlier, we have this interesting lighting here, plus the which is a little bit warmer, plus the more colder, overexposed ambient light coming from the outside, and these artificial lighting that are a little bit more interesting and gives some nice spotlight effects. And yeah, that's it for this image. So it's, as you can see, it's really simple. There are a couple of stuff that I didn't that was interesting with the metal here, with a little bit of dirt maps with thumbs and stuff like that, fingerprints. But as you can see, the overall materials for the whole image are really basic, and everything relates more regarding the mood and the lighting and how to actually take it to the next level with simple tweaks in the post-production part, because as you can see, there's quite a difference between the two, but it's just about like 20 minutes in the post-production. So that's it. Hopefully you've learned some interesting tips and find the new behind the scenes series interesting, and there will be plenty more in the coming weeks. Cheers guys, bye.
Tonight, new